Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki jai. Shri Kshetra Dham ki jai. Itagur Premanande. All glories to the simple devotee. All glories to the simple devotee. All glories to the simple devotee. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnanatamarandhyasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavanishvari Vishubhara Shruti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namaste Giri Rajaya Shri Govardhana Namane Shesha Klesha Nashaya Parmananda Daine Vancha Kalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nastapreshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hare Krishna, everybody. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 24, containing the song sung by Lord Shiva, text number 68. Ata tvam asino Brahman Paramatmam Vipashchitam Vishvam Rudra Bhaya Dwastam Akutaschid Bhayagati Ata tvam asino Brahman Paramatmam Vipashchitam Vishvam Rudra Bhaya Dwastam Akutaschid Bhayagati Ata tvam asino Brahman Paramatmam Vipashchitam Vishvam Rudra Bhaya Dwastam Akutaschid Bhayagati
Atatvam asino Brahman
Paramatman Vichashchitam Vishvam Rudra Bhaya Dwastam Akutaschid Bhayagati Atatvam asino Brahman Paramatman Vipashchitam Vishvam Rudra Bhaya Dwastam Akutaschid Bhayagati. Atattvamasi no Brahman. Paramatman Vipashchitam. Vishvam Rudra Bhayadvastam. Akutaschid Bhayagati. Atatvam no asi Brahman. Paramatman Vipashchitam. Vishvam Rudra Bhayadvastam. Akutaschid Bhayagati. Word for word. Ata. Therefore. Tvam. You. My Lord. Asi. Are. Naha. Our. Brahman. O Supreme Brahman. Parama Atman. O Super Soul. Vipashchitam. For the learned wise man. Vishvam. The whole universe. Rudrabhaya. Being afraid of Rudra. Dvastam. Annihilated. Akutaschitbhaya. Undoubtedly fearless. Gatihi. Destination. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. My dear Lord, all actually learned persons know you as the Supreme Brahman and the Super Soul. Although the entire universe is afraid of Lord Rudra, who ultimately annihilates everything, for the learned devotees, you are the fearless destination of all. Please repeat. My dear Lord, all actually learned persons know you as the Supreme Brahman and the Super Soul. Although the entire universe is afraid of Lord Rudra, who ultimately annihilates everything, for the learned devotees, you are the fearless destination of all. Purport. For the purpose of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of this cosmic manifestation, there are three lords: Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Maheshvara. The material world is finished at the time of annihilation, both the universal body and the small unit. The individual living entities' bodies are susceptible to annihilation at the ultimate end. However, the devotees do not fear the annihilation of the body, for they are confident that after the annihilation, they will go back to home, back to Godhead. Tvaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sarjana. If one strictly follows the process of devotional service, he has no fear of death, for he is predestined to go back home, back to Godhead. The non-devotees are fearful of death because they have no guarantee of where they are going or what type of body they are going to get in their next life. The word Rudrabhaya is significant in this verse because Rudra himself, Lord Shiva, is speaking of fear of Rudra. This indicates that there are many Rudras, 11 Rudras, and the Rudra, Lord Shiva, who is offering this prayer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is different from the other Rudras. He is as powerful as they are. The conclusion is that one Rudra is afraid of another Rudra because each and every one of them is engaged in the destruction of this cosmic manifestation. But for the devotee, everyone is afraid of Rudra, even Rudra himself. A devotee is never afraid of Rudra because he is always secure, being protected by the lotus feet of the Lord. As Shri Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Kontaya pratijanihi name bhakti pranashyati. My dear Arjuna, you may declare publicly that my pure devotee will never be vanquished under any circumstances. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadini Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatadesha Tadini Namaste Jivananda Dasa Yavanacharine Prabhupada Balabhaya Singhasadavanorne Ajnana Tvantakamanam Pashticha Patitadmanam Jnana Guruteya Chidarine Chakshashanamaha. So a very nice verse about destruction, which is a quintessential aspect of the material world. It is what distinguishes the material world from the spiritual world. Because we hear in the spiritual world there's no time. That's often misunderstood. What does it mean that there's no time? And the Brahma Samhita explains that in the verse right after the end of the Govindam prayers. There's a verse explaining every step is a dance, every gate is a walk, and so forth. Every step is a dance, every word is a song. So it explains that there's no degradation. It's not that things aren't happening at different places. You may be dancing with Krishna here and playing something with Krishna here and doing different activities with Krishna. So there's the sense of continuity, but there's no degradation, there's no loss, there's no entropy taking place. Everything is happening eternally. In fact, it's ever increasing. Whereas in the material world, everything is experiencing entropy. So that word time means that things are degrading. Things are falling apart. Whereas in the spiritual world, everything is eternally situated. So Lord Shiva is the force of destruction. And that time force is the personification of Lord Shiva. Actually, Lord Shiva is the personification of time. And so one might say, if they're not aware, they'll say, well, Krishna says, I am time. Yes, Krishna is time. Because Krishna is ultimately the source of Lord Shiva. But Krishna is the ultimate source of time. But one of Lord Shiva's names is Mahakala. Means the time, supreme time. And it's understood that the creation process works in basic like this. There's Krishna. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Ete chamsha kalupumsha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indirayi Vakilam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. Krishna is the supreme source of everything, of all the incarnations, all the forms of the Lord. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. He's the original personality of Godhead, from whom all other personalities of Godhead emanate. Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. Krishna is the source of everything. And from Krishna comes Balaram. Balaram in Vrindavan. And so this Krishna and Balaram in Vrindavan, this is the highest ring of the spiritual world, the highest planet. This is Goloka Vrindavan. This is the original home of all living entities and the highest abode of God. And from there, Krishna expands to Vasudeva. And Vasudeva is Dwarka Krishna. We hear that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. We've all heard that before. Yet we read in the Krishna book that Krishna leaves Vrindavan. So how do we understand Krishna never leaves Vrindavan? The answer is that Krishna in his original form, Akila Rasamrita Murti, that person never leaves Vrindavan. Krishna is always in Vrindavan. But Krishna appears to leave Vrindavan in the form of Vasudeva. So Vasudeva leaves Vrindavan and he becomes the prince of Dwarka, in Mathura and Dwarka, and Krishna performs his pastimes as Vasudeva. And so Vasudeva has a brother who is Balaram, but is in the sense called Sankarshan. And Krishna has a son named Pradyumna and a grandson named Aniruddha, and this is called the Chatravyuha. And this is the original Chatravyuha, called the Dwarka Chatravyuha. Is Krishna in this form, the form of Vasudeva. Vasudeva meaning the son of Vasudeva. The Krishna in Vrindavan is the son of Nanda, Nandana. And our acharyas write that actually Krishna is born of Yashoda, not Devaki. That's a whole seminar. But our acharyas write that. It's a whole mystical thing. So Krishna is both the son of Devaki and Yashoda. But our acharyas explain, and there are many acharyas that explain that actually Krishna is originally in the womb of Yashoda, and then into Devaki, and then taken to Yashoda. That's a whole thing, confirmed. But so Vasudeva is the father of Krishna, and he represents the pure state of being, or Shuddha Sattva, because it is in that place, Vasudeva, that consciousness, that one can actually experience Krishna. And so from Vasudeva, or he who is of Vasudeva, appears. That's why we sing Jai Radha Madhava. This is what Dravida Prabhu told us that, we sing Yamuna Tira Vanachari, but it's not the Yamuna river, it's the Yamuna. But you sing Yamuna because it's Krishna who is of the Yamuna, wandering on the banks of the Yamuna. So it's Yamuna Tira Vanachari. And so in the same way, it's Vasudev, son of Vasudev. So Vasudev is the king of Dwarka. Or no one even really knows if Krishna's the king. He's the king of everything, but actually Ugrasen is like the king. And it's like Rukmini says, no one can actually ascertain your position. Or Krishna says about himself to Rukmini, no one can ascertain my position. Actually, I'm just a vagabond. Krishna tells Rukmini. He says, no one knows if I'm a cowherd boy, or if I'm a prince, or if I'm a king, or if I'm a Vaishya or a Kshatriya. So, Vasudev's brother, Balaram, is called Sankarshan, and Pradyumna, the son of Krishna and Rukmini, and the grandson Aniruddha, the original Chaturvyuha. And from Balaram, Sankarshan expands another Chaturvyuha, which is the four-handed Chaturvyuha, which are the Vishnu Narayan forms. That is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna. And from this Sankarshan comes Mahavishnu. Sometimes Mahavishnu is called Sankarshan. So this Mahavishnu is the creator of the material world. And from this Mahavishnu, he glances at the material energy. And his glance is called Shambho. That glance is time and the living entities, because Krishna is injecting or impregnating the material nature, Durga, with his glance. That glance is charged with time and with the living entities as it goes into the material nature. And that glance is called Shambho, which is the personification of Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva is that glance. And what is that glance? That glance is time, because when time agitates the Pradhan and the Mahatattva, then everything begins. The modes of material nature begin to act, and the elements are formed from the modes of material nature. And you can go into the second and third canto where it talks about how first there is false ego, which Lord Shiva is, Brahma Samhita explains that also. Lord Shiva is this principle, this false ego principle. And so from that false ego, all the other elements come down. Intelligence is false ego transformed into the mode of passion, and then the mode of goodness, and then so forth. And then all the demigods are formed. It's the whole process of creation, which I think I need another read through the Bhagavatam to really be able to explain it perfectly. But continuing on from what we're going to be speaking about, Lord Shiva is the element of time which destroys everything. And so, people worship Lord Shiva many times by covering themselves in ash. And what does that actually symbolize? Well, Lord Shiva is entropy. And so when everything is burned, what's left is ash. That's the substance that remains after everything is finished. And so in the sense that the only thing that is constant about the material world is entropy. It's the only eternal thing here, is that everything is being destroyed, and that process of time is the basis behind everything. And so the worshippers of Lord Shiva have ash on their body, because he is that supreme principle of destruction. And all the living entities in the material world are fearful of this destruction, are fearful of death. They're fearful of annihilation. So all living entities are fearing annihilation. Prabhupada gives the example, and I always think it's kind of sweet when Prabhupada gives this example, just because Prabhupada's personality is so sweet. But Prabhupada, he talks about the bird. The bird is always thinking, is someone coming to kill me? Is he going to kill me? And you see that, me and Gauranga had firsthand experience of that yesterday in the bird cage. This new pheasant's a little insane. And he was, we'd make a wrong move and he'd go around the bird cage whoosh, with his razor sharp claws. And we would be like this. And it'd calm down and we'd go back to feeding. So he's thinking, is he going to kill me? And Sufi is thinking, I will kill him. So this is the process of the material world. But actually, Sufi's not tough. He just acts tough. But the process of destruction gives great fear to all the living entities, except the devotees. This verse is explaining that. The devotees are not scared. Although the entire universe is afraid of Lord Rudra, who ultimately annihilates everything, for the learned devotees, you are the fearless destination of all. So the devotee has no fear. And the classic example given is that the cat has very sharp teeth, and for the mouse, those teeth represent death. And when the mouse is in the mouth of the cat, the mouse is terrified. But when the baby is in the mouth of the cat, when the kitten is in the mouth of the cat, then there's no fear, because the kitten knows this is my mother. So in the same way, the devotee sees death as Krishna's embrace. This is Krishna coming to take me to him. And, you know, when I was having my heart issue a few months back and I was in the hospital, and it was a questionable situation, because they made it sound pretty bleak at the urgent care. And I think you guys were gone for that whole episode. I had a heart problem, and then I was kind of in a lot of pain in my chest for a few days. And on Ram Navami, I really was in pain. So the next morning I went to the urgent care, and thought I was going to be fine. They did an EKG, and they said, "We call an ambulance. You have some serious problem in your heart." And so I went in an ambulance. But I was thinking, like, because I was in so much pain, I was thinking, I feel like I'm going to die. But I had this there was a slight sense of excitement. Like, am I going to actually see Krishna? Am I going to go back to God? So anyhow. But the devotee doesn't see death the same way as the materialist. That's the point. I'm not an elevated devotee, but by Prabhupada's mercy, we all get some knowledge. So this annihilation is very fearful, but the devotee is not afraid, because he always is secure, because he knows he's going to go back to Godhead, which is a symptom of surrender. Sometimes devotees in the beginning stage, or in the stage of not having so much knowledge, I mean, we're all in the beginning stage. I'm especially in the beginning stage, but by reading the writings of the acharyas, one can, by their mercy, develop knowledge. And so, you know, sometimes we think, oh, I'm not going to go back to Godhead. I'm not going to go back to Godhead. I'm not, no way Krishna is going to save a person like me, which is actually a symptom of our false ego. It's a symptom of lack of surrender, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives us 6 symptoms of surrender, and one of them is to always have faith in Krishna's mercy. And we have to have hope against hope, which Dhira Prabhu was speaking of that yesterday, this hope that pure devotee has, this great hope and understanding that I will go back to Godhead because he has faith in Krishna's mercy. And especially when we really accept the mercy of Krishna through the spiritual master, by having faith in the spiritual master and chanting our rounds nicely, following the regulative principles, doing devotional service, we should have confidence in that Krishna, he is behind me, and he will save me from the cycle of birth and death. He'll deliver me. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata devi tathagaro tasyate katita hirta prakasanta mahatmanaha. One who has implicit faith in the Supreme Lord and in the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are revealed. So that's considered by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta one of the most important verses in the whole Vedas. So this implicit faith in Guru and Krishna. So I wanted to speak a little bit of the 12th canto, which talks about annihilation, because there's 3 different types of annihilation, and it's spoken about in the 12th canto. And then I wanted to tell a story, because I like the 12th canto. It's most people don't read deep enough to get to the 12th canto. You know, they'll read. I read the Bhagavatam a few cantos in, but you don't find so many who've finished it all the way to the 12th canto. But the 12th canto is nectar. It's really nectar. So there are 3 types of destruction or annihilation. One of them is naimittika, or occasional annihilation. So naimittika annihilation is the annihilation that takes place when Lord Brahma rests. So at the Naimittika annihilation, this is Shukadeva Goswami speaking. O king, upon the annihilation of the material elements, the universal egg comprising the elemental amalgamation of creation is confronted with destruction. Oh, I'm sorry, that's actually the second one. This is the first one. Oh, here we go. After one day of Brahma, annihilation occurs during his night, which is the same destruction, which is of the same duration. At that time, all the three planetary systems are subject to destruction. This is called Naimittika, or occasional annihilation, during which the original creator, Lord Narayan, lies down upon the bed of Ananta Shesh and absorbs the entire universe within himself while Lord Brahma sleeps. When the two halves of the lifetime of Lord Brahma, the most elevated created being, are complete, the seven basic elements of created are annihilated. So this is saying when Lord Brahma dies, the seven basic elements of creation are annihilated. O king, upon the annihilation of the material elements, the universal egg comprising the elemental amalgamation of creation is confronted with destruction. As annihilation approaches, O king, there will be no rain upon the earth for 100 years. Drought will lead to famine, and the starving populace will literally consume one another. The inhabitants of earth, bewildered by the force of time, will gradually be destroyed. The sun, in its annihilating form, will drink up with its terrible rays all the water of the ocean, of living bodies, and the earth itself. But the devastating sun will not give any rain in return. Next, the great fire of annihilation will flare up from the mouth of Lord Sankarshan. Carried by the mighty force of the wind, this fire will burn throughout the universe, scorching the lifeless cosmic shell. Burn from all sides, from above by the blazing sun, and from below by the fire of the Lord Sankarshan. The universal sphere will go like a burning ball of cow dung. Good morning, folks. A great and terrible wind of destruction will begin to blow for more than 100 years, and the sky covered with dust will turn gray. After that, O king, groups of multicolored clouds will gather, roaring terribly with thunder, and will pour down floods of rain for 100 years. At that time, the shell of the universe will fill up with water, forming a single cosmic ocean. As the entire universe is flooded, the water will rob the earth of its unique quality of fragrance, and the element earth, deprived of its distinguishing quality, will be dissolved. And so this is going to go on to speak onto how each element is progressively dissolved into itself. Earth is dissolved into water, water is dissolved into fire, fire is dissolved into air, is dissolved into ether, ether is dissolved into mind, mind is dissolved into intelligence, intelligence is dissolved into false ego, and then everything goes back into the Mahatattva, and then everything's finished. This is the process of destruction, which is the inverse of creation. And so then there's one more type of creation, which is very interesting because, or of annihilation, excuse me. This is Maharaj Parikshit being spoken to by Shukadeva Goswami. My dear Parikshit, when the illusory false ego that binds the soul has been cut off with the sword of discriminating knowledge, and one has developed realization of Lord Achyuta, the Supreme Soul, this is called the Antyatika, or ultimate annihilation of material existence. So this is, when I read this the first time, I was kind of amazed. I was thinking, wow, this is very amazing, because we hear about the destruction, the partial destruction at that day, end of Lord Brahma's day, and there's the destruction that takes place at the end of Lord Brahma's night, but the ultimate annihilation is when we become liberated. At that stage, one achieves ultimate annihilation of material existence, and the way to do that is by cutting off the false ego with discriminating knowledge, and when you have realization of Lord Achyuta, the Supreme Soul. So it's a very beautiful statement. So those are the three types of annihilation. So we should actually aim for the last type of annihilation rather than becoming annihilated in the partial annihilation or the end annihilation. When Brahma dies, we can aim to be annihilated by becoming liberated. So there's your choices. We're going to be annihilated either way, so we should go with the door number 3. Krishna's behind door number 3, and then there's, just fire behind the other 2 doors. So, yeah. And there's nice examples of how devotees are not scared. They don't fear death. And devotees fearless. We hear of course Srila Prabhupada Abhay Charnadavinda, fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna, fearless in the service of God. Krishna says, declare it boldly, my devotee never perishes. And that's one of the things that goes away when you become a devotee, because you understand, I'm not this body. Janayat yashu vairagyam gyanam chayada haitukam. When one becomes a devotee, they understand that I'm not this body and that I have nothing to do with this world, therefore I have nothing to fear. And it's one of those realizations that has to develop, because we may not fear death, but many times we find devotees, they fear sinful reaction. They're very concerned, or they're caught up in karma. It's easy to get caught up in this karma consciousness. Oh, this action, they have no faith in that Krishna is protecting them, because they are convinced in the service of Krishna, convinced that their service is protecting them. So we have to become very, very fixed up in devotional service. We have to have enough faith in our own devotional service to believe sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vrajaham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha shamimasuja. Are we surrendered to Krishna? We develop that consciousness of being surrendered, and we have faith that we are surrendered. That Krishna, I am yours. Do with me what you will. If you choose to punish me, punish me. If you choose to enlighten me, enlighten me. If you choose to liberate me, liberate me. In all circumstances, I remain yours. And my heart is simply surrendered to the desire to serve you. My sincere intent is to serve you. And in whatever mistakes or challenges or maybe even sinful activities that may have happened along the way, you may punish me if you like. You may liberate me if you like. But I am convinced that my sincere desire is to serve you. For such a person, Krishna says, apichet siddharacharo bhajate mama nanyabhak sadareva samantavyaha samyag javashito saha. And even if one is Sudarachar, even if one is extraordinarily sinful, because he has bhajate mama nanyabhak, he's unflinchingly devoted to Krishna. Then Krishna says, sadareva samantavyaha, that I'll consider him a sadhu, because he's determined. He's fixed up in this consciousness that I will serve Krishna. If not in this life, in my next life. Somehow or another, I will serve Krishna. And that consciousness is very pleasing to Krishna. Krishna will relieve us of all sin because of that consciousness. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha shamimasuja. Krishna says, do not fear. So we should not fear. So a truly liberated person, Prabhupada says this in various purports in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, that a truly liberated person has no fear of sinful reaction because he's convinced of his own devotional service. So how do we become convinced of our own devotional service? We have to seriously engage in devotional service, seriously hear, seriously chant, seriously take the order of the Guru as our heart, mind, and soul, and engage in that with unflinching determination. Ekeha kuru nandana, that life and soul. So we accept that consciousness. Just like when Mukunda Datta was chastised by Lord Chaitanya. Mukunda Datta was one of Lord Chaitanya's very close associates. He was a child and friend of Lord Chaitanya. And Mukunda Datta was a pure devotee of the Lord, but he had some inclination toward hearing from impersonalists. And he would go and he would lead kirtan with the devotees, and he would associate with the devotees, and then he would actually secretly go to impersonalist sanghas. And Lord Chaitanya is all-knowing, of course. So when Lord Chaitanya manifested himself in the Mahaprakash as Krishna and sat on the altar, and he was revealing himself to all the devotees, for some time. He was calling every devotee in to take darshan and to benedict them. And he called all the devotees, but Mukunda Datta remained outside. And so Srivas Pandit and Dvaita Acharya said, my dear Lord, Mukunda Datta is still outside. You haven't called him. And Lord Chaitanya said, I don't want to see Mukunda Datta. Mukunda Datta secretly is an impersonalist. He has impersonalist philosophy, which he studies and acts like a devotee, but actually he holds this impersonalist philosophy. Therefore, I don't wish to see him. And so, of course, Mukunda Datta was devastated, being that he had pure love for Lord Chaitanya. And so Mukunda Datta said, well, if I can't see you, just answer my one question. How many births will it take till I see you? Lord Chaitanya said, you will see me after 1,000,000 births. And so what was Mukunda Datta's reaction? Haribo! He was ecstatic. He was crying in ecstasy. He says, I will see you. I will see you. Even if in 1,000,000 births, I will see you. And I accept that that's your desire. I fully accept that. And so Lord Chaitanya's heart immediately melted and he said, Mukunda Datta, how can I possibly stay away from you? You're so surrendered to me. And so then Mukunda Datta came and embraced Lord Chaitanya. So this is one way we can understand. That's the consciousness of the devotee. Devotees are fearless of annihilation. And since we were in the 12th canto, I couldn't help but remember Markandeya Rishi, who was a great sage and who thought, I want to see the illusory energy of the Lord. This was his thought. He said, my dear Lord, he actually prayed to Krishna, may I see your illusory energy? And so Markandeya Rishi was meditating in Badrik Ashram, and then the annihilation came, the flood waters came of annihilation, and they washed him away. But Markandeya Rishi had a boon that he lives this, I forgot what it's called. There's a certain type of person, Ashvatthama is one of them. They live like even through the annihilation. And so the floodwaters came, and Markandeya Rishi was just in the deluge, floating around the destruction for, eons of Brahma's night. He was just floating there, totally like bewildered. And he was floating. And finally he saw a little island, which actually is Gorjung Dweep, if anybody didn't know, in Mayapur. So if you go to Mayapur, Mayapur is never destroyed in the annihilation. It remains. So he went, that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. This pastime happened in Mayapur. So then, of course, he was floating and he saw Krishna on the banyan leaf, sucking his own toe. And when he looked in Krishna's mouth, and then he saw himself sitting in Badrik Ashram, and then he fell back in, and came out of the whole thing. It's really trippy pastime. But the idea is that the devotee is not disturbed by the annihilation. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. We find it actually. Really sweet verse. I'm going to have to search it. Yeah, 14.2. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own self. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation, nor disturbed at the time of dissolution. Prabhupada says, after acquiring perfect transcendental knowledge, one acquires qualitative equality with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, becoming free from the repetition of birth and death. One does not, however, lose his identity as an individual soul. Prabhupada goes on. We can note here that for a liberated person, like I was just explaining in the example with Mukunda Datta, there's other examples in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that are relevant also. For a liberated person, there is no birth or death. There's no fear of reaction because he understands the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He understands that. And so sometimes we hear devotees, they think, and they're generally not ISKCON devotees, but we hear in kind of the outskirts of Gaudiya Vaishnavas that Bhagavad Gita is a lower scripture and that it's not giving us Braj Bhakti or these types of things. But you can't possibly even approach, Braj Bhakti and Krishna's pastimes without first understanding you're not this body. Because it's an understanding you're not this body that one can actually develop bhakti. Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, Nisochati Nakankshati, Samasarveshu Bhuteshu, Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. So if you want to develop Mad Bhaktim Labate Param, first thing you have to do is become a Brahma Bhuta, meaning you're on the spiritual platform. And how do you come to that Brahminical platform, that platform of Brahman? Krishna says, Sagunan Samatit Yaitan, Bhakti Yogena Sevate. Bhakti Yogena Sevate, Sagunan Samatit Yaitan. That if you're engaging in Bhakti Yoga, then you can go beyond the modes of material nature and you can become Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. You can become situated on the platform of Brahman. Meaning you can understand you're not this body. So that's the first preliminary thing. And for one who understands that, Nijayate muyate vakarachin nayam bhutva bhavita vanabhuyaha ajo nidya shashvato yambarano nahanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul, there's neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, will not come into being. He's unborn and never annihilated. So when we really think, I'm a soul, I don't take birth, I don't die. Nothing, I can't be burned by fire. I can't be moistened by water. I can't be withered by the wind. I'm eternal, unbreakable, insoluble. So when we understand ourselves as spirit, we become very strong. And so a pure devotee, he's totally unconcerned whether he takes birth again or he doesn't take birth, because he knows that actually I never take birth. Whether I take birth or I don't take birth, I'll be doing the same thing. I'll be fixed in Krishna's service. Such a liberated person is, as Krishna says, undisturbed at the time of annihilation or creation. He understands himself in the spiritual position. And in that place, like Dhiro was speaking on this verse yesterday, which Prabhupada quoted, it's relevant in this context. In that place, Jnanavan mam prapadyate is one who's a Jnanavan, one who has knowledge, one who really understands himself as not this body. Mam prapadyate, he surrenders unto me. What is that surrender? That surrender is, Krishna, I'm yours. He's completely satisfied, even more than a jnani. The jnani, or even the jnana mishra bhakti. Jnana mishra bhakti is jnana, is bhakti yoga mixed with some jnana. This jnana mishra bhakti means I'm very much concerned with how much I know about Krishna. I'm very much concerned with how much advancement I'm making. I'm very much absorbed in this consciousness. Whereas the pure devotee, he is simply satisfied to do service. He's just simply satisfied to do service. Let me serve you, Lord Chaitanya. You're my Lord unconditionally. Whether you break my heart or you appear before me, you're my Lord unconditionally. And so I'm completely satisfied in my service to you. And therefore Krishna gives those devotees the complete realization. Krishna gives them his very self. When he told the gopis that I can't repay you for what you've done for me. You have to just be satisfied by your service. This is the consciousness of a pure devotee. Because he understands Vasudevam Sarvamiti, that there is nothing but Krishna. Krishna is everything. Krishna is all that matters. And therefore, I'm no longer even really concerned with my own personal spiritual development. I'm simply concerned with Krishna's welfare. Mother Yashoda was not thinking of her spiritual advancement. She was thinking, I hope Krishna doesn't stub his toe on the sharp rocks in Vrindavan. That's what your Mother Yashoda was thinking. That's the consciousness that's developed when one realizes they're a soul and simply surrenders to Krishna. Krishna is my everything. such a person becomes fully satisfied. So the devotee has no fear because he has actual knowledge. Because we understand there's many, many verses to support this fact that if one actually understands I'm not this body, which would mean you don't have fear, you're fearless, then you have to be a devotee. With the Atmaram verse, the Atmaram verse is indicating, right, that someone who's an Atmarama, liberated person, a person who has knowledge, they become a devotee. And anybody who actually is aware of this not being the body, they become Krishna's devotee. And therefore they're undisturbed in all circumstances. They become fixed up and they become fearless. They simply let Krishna will decide if I go back to Godhead. Krishna will decide if I take birth again and do service. Krishna will punish me if I deserve punishment. And in the purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport to the Apichet Siddharacho verse, even if one commits the most abominable activity verse, he says that the devotee who commits an activity of abominable nature, he doesn't try to rationalize it. He just says, he admits, yes, I did it, and I deserve all punishment for it. And that's up to you, Krishna. I accept whatever punishment you want to give me. And actually, he feels so much remorse that the remorse is the punishment itself. And then after that, Krishna says, he quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. So when we have that fixed consciousness, that I'm going to serve Krishna no matter what, then we become peaceful, we become undisturbed, we become fearless. And I'll just end it with this famous verse I love to quote every day before my japa. That Krishna said, or Sukadeva Goswami says, that the doubtless and fearless way to attain success for all is the constant chanting of the holy names of the Lord, following the ways of the great authorities. So, yeah. Haranamanu Kirtanam. Any questions or comments? Lita, first.
Some people will say, what's the urgency then? If we're confident we're going back to Krishna and, we're eternal, what's the urgency?
That's a good question.
And also, we're told, we need to be afraid of Maya.
Yeah.
So,
well, the two, it's different stages and different levels of consciousness, but they both apply for the pure devotee and for the neophyte, because there are 4 types of pious people who approach Krishna. It's all in this section, the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter. 4 types of pious people. There's the Jigyasura, there's the Jnani, there's the Artha, and there's the Artharti. And each of them are coming to Krishna with some material desire. He's inquisitive, he wants wealth, he wants relief from distress, and he wants knowledge, the Jnani. And out of the best, the Jnani is the best, because he's so close to being a pure devotee, because Jnanavam Mam Prapadyate. So in each of those circumstances, one has to be desperate, approaching Krishna. And so there's some urgency. And the urgency is that I don't want to suffer in this material world. We're all distressed. So usually it's a combination of all 4. We're all distressed, and there's urgency. And I will engage in that service. And we're scared of Maya because Maya hurts. Maya is causing me so much pain. That's the lower level. The higher level is that I'm terrified of Maya because Maya makes me forget Krishna, and I love Krishna, and I don't want to forget Krishna. And it's urgent because I want to serve Krishna. And I want to go back to Godhead, not to relieve myself of suffering, but I want to go back to Godhead to serve Krishna unimpeded. That's why a pure devotee desires to go back to Godhead. It's a pure desire, but because in the material world, there's so much obstruction in our services. Whereas in the spiritual world, we can render service perpetually without any impediments. And so devotees have that desire to go and render service to Krishna in that place. But in the beginning, the urgency is that we need to get out, we need to stop suffering. But that's not exactly the pure stage. But we come to the pure stage through that process of associating with pure devotees. Make sense? Lavanga Prabhu?
So once the devotees asked Srila Prabhupada, the holy name is all powerful. Why do we have to, follow these rules, regulations, do this, do that? We just chant the holy name, we'll make advancement. And they had this sense of didn't really have a sense of urgency. And Prabhupada said, yes, you can do that, but your progress will be very, very slow.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but my question, it was just a comment to go off of what your point was. But my question is, can you explain a little more? Because I get confused sometimes with the annihilations, like when the partial annihilation takes place, when the complete annihilation takes place. And isn't there one where the universe fills halfway up with water and then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard different things. That was just from the 12th canto, what I read. There's the final annihilation, which is the liberation of the material of the jiva. And then there's the, that's called Naimanika. I was reading them all in Sanskrit. And then there is the annihilation that takes place at the end of Brahma's day, which is what I believe is the filling up with water, and it fills up everything up to the Brahmaloka, those 3 planetary systems, and then they're resting. It's the nighttime for those beings on those planetary systems. And according to the Bhagavatam, Lord Vishnu absorbs. That was an interesting point. I'd have to ask Dravida Prabhu or something on, because it says that it's absorbed into Lord Vishnu, but that's what happens at the end of Brahma's life, I thought. So I just read that right now. It's interesting. And then there's also annihilations that take place sometimes between manus, little tiny annihilations, but they're not considered maha annihilations like we were discussing in the 12th canto. But there's these little mini, floods and things, but they're not maha death. So that's all I know. You'd have to ask some more learned devotee. I can go back and, I just thought of that as I was I thought, I didn't know what to talk about. And I thought, well, I'll talk about annihilation. So I was researching the 12th canto over at the Jack Furrier's where I was taking the van. So I have to read more into the purports and things to really give you a right answer on that. Because I only read the 12th canto one time.
Yeah, it would be nice if a devotee came out with a chart that, explained, okay, this is when this annihilation takes place,
Yeah.
make it more clear.
Well, some of these things I really hope to clear up when I do Bhakti Vaibhava.
Yeah.
So, in a few days. Grandhara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Right.
That was my